This is Discover USA Collapse, and tonight we're pulling back the curtain on something you probably have sitting right now in your kitchen: spices. Cinnamon, turmeric, paprika, chili powder. They sound harmless, even healthy, right? But across America, in 48 states to be exact, an unsettling wave of recalls has been spreading like wildfire. Federal alerts, supermarket chains pulling products off the shelves, and families suddenly realizing that the very seasoning they sprinkled on their dinner could be contaminated with toxic heavy metals, bacteria, or undisclosed additives. These aren't isolated cases. We're talking about recalls so large they span coast to coast, affecting both bargain brands and names you thought you could trust. And yet, most people haven't even heard about it. That's how fragile and dangerous our food supply chain has quietly become. While you were seasoning your morning eggs or your evening stew, entire batches of spice jars were being tested and flagged for lead levels high enough to cause neurological damage in children. Salmonella outbreaks linked to black pepper, and illegal dyes meant to brighten curry powders. And the recalls aren't slowing down, they're accelerating. The truth is, behind every glossy label and every cheerful cooking show, there's an industry fighting to keep up with global demand by cutting corners, outsourcing to suppliers halfway around the world, and pushing product onto shelves with little oversight. And it's you, the everyday consumer, who ends up paying the price with your health. So buckle in, because we're about to count down the biggest names, the most shocking recalls, and the disturbing reality of what toxic spices are doing to American households right now. Number 4, McCormick. For over a century, McCormick has been the symbol of America's spice racks. Those red caps, those tidy labels, trusted since 1889. But behind the polished branding lies a darker reality, one that has been slowly unraveling in the form of shocking recalls, consumer lawsuits, and independent lab tests that paint a very different picture. In July 2021, McCormick had to announce a sweeping recall of 3 popular products: McCormick Perfect Pinch Italian Seasoning, Frank's Red Hot Buffalo Ranch Seasoning, and Lori's Buffalo Wing Seasoning, after the FDA flagged potential salmonella contamination. The numbers were staggering. Over 150,000 bottles had already been distributed nationwide, sold in chains like Walmart, Target, and Kroger. Households that had sprinkled the seasoning over chicken, pasta, and even kids' lunchbox snacks suddenly realized they might have been serving bacteria capable of causing hospitalization, organ damage, or even death in vulnerable people. And here's the disturbing part. That wasn't the first time, nor the last. A year later, McCormick was again in headlines after undeclared allergens were discovered in several blends. To the average consumer, undeclared allergen might sound minor, but for someone with a peanut or wheat allergy, it can mean anaphylaxis within minutes. That is a life or death mistake, printed into a label by a company with more than $6 billion in yearly revenue. The trust was already cracking, but things grew darker when independent watchdog groups began publishing data on heavy metals inside popular spices. McCormick's cinnamon, turmeric, and paprika repeatedly tested positive for elevated levels of lead, arsenic, and cadmium. Not once, not twice, but across multiple product batches. Lead has no safe threshold in children. Even 1 microgram per deciliter in the bloodstream can reduce IQ, impair growth, and create lifelong neurological deficits. Arsenic, classified as a Group 1 human carcinogen, accumulates quietly and is linked to cancers of the lung, bladder, and skin, as well as cardiovascular disease. And cadmium, another metal detected, targets the kidneys, causing permanent damage over years of exposure. Now think about that. These aren't exotic foreign imports from an unknown street market. These are the very spices sitting in American pantries under the banner of the taste you trust. Mothers dusting cinnamon onto oatmeal. Grandparents adding paprika to deviled eggs. Every shake of the jar could be dosing loved ones with substances toxic enough to alter a child's brain development. Why does this happen? Because McCormick, like many giants in the spice trade, outsources sourcing to global suppliers, operating under weak or virtually non-existent agricultural oversight. Turmeric from India has repeatedly been found laced with lead chromate, a bright yellow industrial chemical used to make dull roots look vibrant. Paprika imports from Asia and the Middle East have been adulterated with Sudan red dyes, substances banned in food worldwide because of their cancer-causing properties. These adulterants are cheap, effective at deceiving buyers, and devastating for human health. McCormick insists it tests, insists it monitors suppliers, but the recalls tell a different story. The FDA doesn't have the resources to test every shipment. Instead, it relies heavily on corporate self-regulation, trusting the very companies who profit from cutting corners. And when you're commanding a multi-billion-dollar global market share, the temptation to overlook a failed test or to push a batch through without rigorous checks becomes immense. The fallout is heartbreaking. Pediatricians across the US have reported elevated lead levels in toddlers, some traced directly back to contaminated cinnamon used in baby food and snack bars. Families have filed lawsuits against spice brands, demanding accountability. Social media has erupted with photos of recalled jars, hashtags calling out the betrayal, and parents panicking as they realize their safe kitchen staples could be poisoning their kids. And McCormick's response? Carefully worded corporate statements, offering refunds, promising improved testing, never once addressing the larger pattern. Why such failures happen again and again under their watch? But beyond the recalls and lawsuits, there's something even more chilling: the erosion of consumer trust. McCormick has spent generations cultivating its image as America's most dependable spice brand. The taste you trust is stamped onto ads, commercials, and supermarket displays. Yet how do you rebuild trust after the word salmonella appears in your press release? How do you assure families after allergen slip-ups nearly trigger fatal reactions? How do you tell parents their child's brain damage from lead exposure was just a supply chain error? At some point, slogans stop working, and in a global market already destabilized by inflation, supply chain bottlenecks, and increasing consumer skepticism, McCormick's failures represent something much bigger: the collapse of the illusion that our everyday pantry items are safe, regulated, and reliable. This isn't just a story about one spice company. It's about what happens when corporations are allowed to regulate themselves, when safety testing is sacrificed for profit margins, and when the most ordinary part of your dinner, the pinch of seasoning you thought was harmless, turns into a silent health hazard with nationwide consequences. And if McCormick, the leader of the industry, can't keep its products safe, what does that say about every smaller, cheaper brand lining store shelves right now? Number 3, Trader Joe's. For decades, Trader Joe's has built a reputation as the quirky, friendly, healthier alternative to big box grocery stores. With Hawaiian-shirted employees, hand-drawn shelf signs, and the promise of unique, carefully sourced products, millions of Americans trust this chain like family. But behind the cheerful branding lies a disturbing record of recalls and contamination scandals that reveal a dangerous truth. Even in the aisles of America's most beloved grocery chain, toxic spices and unsafe food are finding their way into kitchens nationwide. In late 2022, Trader Joe's shocked loyal customers by recalling its organic tropical fruit blend, not for one contaminant, but for multiple instances of salmonella. Hundreds of thousands of bags had already been sold across 30 states, and the CDC traced dozens of hospitalizations back to that recall. Families who thought they were buying organic, wholesome food ended up in emergency rooms. And it wasn't the only time. That same year, Trader Joe's recalled packages of ground cinnamon after independent testing revealed dangerously high levels of lead. Think about that. A spice parents sprinkled on toast, oatmeal, or applesauce for their children turned out to be laced with a neurotoxin that can permanently alter brain development. Lead exposure at even the lowest levels has been linked to reduced IQ, behavior disorders, and learning disabilities in kids. Yet the jars sat on Trader Joe's shelves, labeled organic, sold under the illusion of purity and safety. And then came the sesame recalls. In 2023, multiple Trader Joe's spice blends, including its everything but the bagel sesame seasoning, were pulled after it was discovered they contained undeclared sesame, a top allergen that can trigger severe anaphylaxis. For the millions of Americans with sesame allergies, eating one pinch of that seasoning could mean a trip to the ER. Customers trusted Trader Joe's to carefully curate its products, but instead, many learned the hard way that mislabeling at the supplier level can slip right through. The irony is cruel. The very chain marketed as safer than mainstream supermarkets is repeatedly caught selling foods that are every bit as risky, if not more. Why is this happening? Trader Joe's operates on a private label model, meaning it doesn't actually make most of its products. Instead, it sources them from global suppliers. The same massive plants and factories that churn out items for Walmart, Costco, and other retailers. But while the packaging says Trader Joe's, the oversight is no stricter. In fact, watchdog groups argue it's weaker, because Trader Joe's refuses to disclose who its suppliers are. That secrecy means accountability is nearly impossible. If something goes wrong, like lead in cinnamon or salmonella in spices, the blame gets diffused. The supplier points fingers at global farms, Trader Joe's points fingers at suppliers, and the consumer is left sick, confused, and unprotected. Transparency, the very thing customers assume they're paying for, is missing. And let's not forget the lawsuits. After the lead contamination was uncovered in Trader Joe's spices, several consumer protection groups filed legal action, claiming the company failed to warn buyers of known health risks. The court documents laid bare a troubling fact. Trader Joe's had access to supplier testing results months before the recalls, but failed to act quickly. By the time jars were pulled, thousands of families had already been exposed. That is not just negligence, it's a betrayal of trust. To parents who thought Trader Joe's organic meant safe, the betrayal cuts even deeper. Imagine serving your child apple slices dusted with cinnamon, only to later read in the news that it contained a heavy metal that stunts cognitive growth. The ripple effects are devastating. Pediatricians in several states have reported clusters of children with elevated blood lead levels linked to cinnamon snacks sold at Trader Joe's. Consumer watchdog groups are demanding stricter FDA oversight of spice imports. Meanwhile, customers, once fiercely loyal, are flooding online forums with outrage, sharing lists of products they'll never buy again. Trader Joe's online reputation, once a fortress of positive reviews, is now riddled with comments about distrust, sickness, and deception. And the brand's sunny, Hawaiian-shirted image no longer feels quirky. It feels like a mask hiding systemic failures. The truth is simple but horrifying. Trader Joe's has positioned itself as a sanctuary for careful eaters, health-conscious parents, and seniors trying to avoid dangerous additives. Yet the reality of toxic spice recalls, salmonella outbreaks, and allergen failures shows the chain is no safer than the cheapest discount aisle. Maybe worse, because secrecy about suppliers makes it nearly impossible for consumers to make informed choices. And when the curtain is finally pulled back, what do we see? A beloved chain that has been quietly feeding millions of Americans products no different from the global supply chain disasters it claims to rise above. This is not just a story about one store. It's about the illusion of safety we buy into when we trust a brand's image more than the hard data. Trader Joe's is learning the hard way that charm and marketing can't erase the damage caused by toxic spices and reckless oversight. The recalls keep coming, the lawsuits are piling up, and the customers are starting to wake up. The question is, how many more recalls will it take before America finally realizes that even the healthier choice may be poisoning us all along? Number 2, Walmart's great value spices. If McCormick is the polished giant and Trader Joe's is the quirky alternative, then Walmart's great value line is the everyman's choice, the budget brand that fills millions of American spice racks from coast to coast. But budget, in this case, has come to mean something far more sinister than low prices. Over the last decade, Walmart's in-house spices have been at the center of some of the most alarming contamination reports in the entire food industry. In 2015, Great Value Black Pepper was recalled across 40 states for salmonella contamination after several consumers were hospitalized. The FDA confirmed the presence of salmonella in sealed containers straight off the shelf. Families who thought they were saving money by choosing the store brand instead found themselves serving pathogens strong enough to cause sepsis in children, elderly relatives, and anyone with a weakened immune system. And it didn't stop there. In 2020, Walmart's Great Value Taco Seasoning Mix was pulled after undeclared allergens were discovered. Consumers with a soy or wheat allergies had been eating products mislabeled from the very beginning, risking anaphylaxis with every taco night. But the most disturbing revelations came when independent labs tested Walmart's bargain spices for heavy metals. Cinnamon, paprika, and turmeric under the Great Value label showed elevated lead and cadmium levels, not just slightly above recommended amounts, but in some cases, 10 times higher than California's maximum allowable dose levels for daily exposure. Think about that. A teaspoon of cinnamon in your morning oatmeal could deliver a neurotoxic load of lead significant enough to impair a child's IQ if consumed regularly. Cadmium exposure, linked to kidney disease and brittle bones, quietly builds in the body over years. And these aren't exotic imports being sold on a shady website. These are the jars and packets Americans pick up during their weekly grocery run, believing they're harmless. Because the brand name, Great Value, sits under the trusted Walmart umbrella. Why is Walmart so vulnerable to these failures? Scale. Walmart moves billions of dollars in groceries every year, and its private label Great Value brand is sourced from dozens of suppliers around the world, often the cheapest bidder. That means spices from farms in India, China, and Turkey are blended, packaged, and distributed under one label with minimal testing in between. The FDA does not test every lot. Instead, they rely on Walmart to police its own supply chain. And when your business model is built on cutting pennies from every transaction, testing often becomes the first corner to cut. Advocacy groups have repeatedly slammed Walmart for insufficient supplier transparency, arguing that customers have no way of knowing where their spices come from or what conditions they were grown under. In 2022, a class action lawsuit was filed against Walmart, alleging that its Great Value cinnamon contained unsafe levels of lead that were knowingly sold without warning labels. Court filings revealed that Walmart had received supplier data flagging the issue months before any action was taken. By then, tens of thousands of families had already used the cinnamon in everything from holiday cookies to baby food. The consequences are devastating and deeply personal. Pediatricians have traced elevated blood lead levels in children back to spices bought at Walmart. Senior citizens, already vulnerable to heavy metal accumulation, are at even greater risk of kidney and heart damage. The very groups that Walmart markets to as value-conscious, families with kids, retirees on fixed incomes, are the ones suffering the greatest harm. And Walmart's response? A series of carefully worded statements, shifting blame to suppliers, promising enhanced safety protocols, all while quietly restocking shelves with the same products under the same trusted label. What makes the Walmart story especially chilling is the illusion of safety that scale creates. Customers assume that because Walmart is America's largest retailer, its products must be safe, heavily regulated, and vetted at the highest levels. But the reality is the opposite. The sheer size of Walmart's supply chain makes it nearly impossible to monitor, and the financial pressure to deliver low-cost goods creates fertile ground for negligence. When heavy metals are found in value spices, it's not just a contamination issue. It's evidence of a system that prioritizes profit margins over public health. And the pattern is now undeniable. Salmonella outbreaks, allergen mislabeling, lead and cadmium exposure, repeated lawsuits, and families betrayed. At some point, we have to ask, what is the real cost of Great Value? Because when the price of cinnamon is cut in half, the hidden cost may be your child's cognitive future, your grandmother's kidneys, or your own long-term health. Walmart's Great Value spices are not just a budget choice. They are a ticking time bomb, sitting quietly on millions of American kitchen shelves, waiting to do damage meal by meal, shake by shake, until another recall finally forces the truth into the open. Number 1, Amazon spices and third-party sellers. If McCormick represents tradition, Trader Joe's the illusion of care, and Walmart the danger of scale, then Amazon is the new frontier of chaos, and the most dangerous of all. Because unlike the others, Amazon isn't just selling branded goods with supply chains you can trace. It's an open marketplace where anyone, anywhere in the world, can ship a bag of turmeric, chili powder, or cinnamon into the American kitchen, with almost no oversight at all. In 2023, a bombshell investigation by Consumer Reports tested dozens of popular spices sold on Amazon, many under generic or unknown labels, and the results were horrifying. Over half contained elevated levels of lead, arsenic, or cadmium. Several brands had zero allergen disclosures, even though testing confirmed traces of peanuts, soy, and wheat. And some were outright fraudulent. Paprika colored with Sudan dyes. Turmeric bulked with chalk powder and cinnamon sticks that weren't even cinnamon. But cassia bark dyed to look authentic. The reason this is so terrifying is because Amazon spices are exploding in popularity. Prices are cheap, the reviews are glowing, and customers assume that if it's on Amazon, the world's biggest retailer, it must be safe. But here's the truth. The FDA does not pre-approve these imports, and Amazon's own safety checks are notoriously thin. A 2022 lawsuit revealed that Amazon knowingly sold recalled cinnamon from a foreign seller for months after the FDA warning went out. Families continued to buy it, sprinkle it on breakfast, and feed it to children, unaware that every teaspoon contained heavy metals far above federal safety guidelines. When asked for comment, Amazon repeated its familiar line: "We require sellers to follow all applicable laws." But enforcement is virtually non-existent. Sellers shut down overnight when caught, only to reappear under a new brand name the next day. And it's not just fringe no-name labels. Some Amazon best sellers in the spice category have been directly linked to contaminated batches traced overseas. In India, turmeric exports tainted with lead chromate were seized in bulk, yet those same lots showed up in American Amazon warehouses weeks later, already distributed to buyers in 48 states. The scale of this is staggering. Unlike McCormick or Walmart, which issue national recalls when a problem is found, Amazon often doesn't even notify buyers. Unless you happen to read an FDA bulletin or stumble across a news article, you may never know the spice you used in last night's dinner was flagged as dangerous. That silence is deadly. Parents have discovered the truth only after routine blood tests revealed elevated lead levels in their children. Doctors in New York, Michigan, and California have traced clusters of lead poisoning cases back to Amazon spice purchases. Consumer watchdogs warn that for seniors, whose bodies can't filter heavy metals as efficiently, long-term use of these tainted spices can accelerate dementia, kidney disease, and cardiovascular decline. Yet sales continue, because Amazon's algorithm rewards cheap, fast-shipped products with thousands of 5-star reviews. Reviews often written by bots or incentivized buyers. It's a perfect storm. Toxic products hidden behind a wall of digital convenience, marketed as organic, pure, and all natural, delivered straight to your doorstep. This is not just negligence, it's systemic. Amazon has built a trillion-dollar empire by scaling convenience beyond comprehension. But in the food sector, that convenience has turned deadly. With little regulation, minimal accountability, and virtually no consumer protection, Amazon's spice marketplace has become the single largest funnel for toxic, adulterated, and mislabeled seasonings in America. And unlike McCormick or Walmart, Amazon doesn't face the same brand loyalty risks because its sellers are faceless and disposable. When one brand name burns, another pops up the next day. The cycle never ends. And as long as customers keep clicking "add to cart," the toxins keep flowing silently into kitchens across the country. So what does all this mean? From McCormick's salmonella scandals to Trader Joe's lead-laced cinnamon, from Walmart's great value, toxic bargains, to Amazon's wild west of third-party sellers, the message is chillingly clear. America's spice supply chain is broken. It's not just one company, not just one recall. It's a pattern of deception, negligence, and profit-driven shortcuts that endanger millions of families. Spices, once symbols of warmth, culture, and tradition, have become silent carriers of poison, slipping past regulators and landing directly onto our dinner tables. And while corporations issue polished apologies, families are left with hospital bills, irreversible health damage, and a lingering sense of betrayal. The real question is this: how many more recalls will it take before consumers stop trusting the illusion of safety in our food system? How many more children must suffer from lead poisoning? How many more seniors from kidney failure before accountability is forced on these giants? We deserve better. We deserve transparency, rigorous testing, and honest labeling. But until that happens, the spice jars in your kitchen may not be flavoring your food. They may be slowly poisoning it. So the next time you reach for cinnamon, turmeric, or paprika, ask yourself, do you really know what's in that jar? Or are you trusting a system that's already failed you again and again?